hello everyone. You know, this is the biggest room I've given a presentation in, so I really appreciate everyone coming. We really wanted to talk about art directing for in-camera VFX. Now, although it's art directing for in-camera VFX, it's also art directing for traditional production and for VFX. So you'll see a lot of that intertwined. Today, like he said, you have myself and Safari, and so there's a lot of slides to go through, so I'm going to jump right in. So who is Narwhal Studios? Narwhal Studios, we are a group of creatives with an expertise in art departments, in-camera VFX, visualization, and game development. We've worked on a couple projects that you've known, or not, right? But really, since 2018, we've been working on projects that are both small and large, and we've had some really, I'm very grateful for some of the projects we've landed. So that's some of what we're going to share. We're going to play our sizzle reel really quick. Everything was created or rendered out of Unreal Engine. So that's something to point out. Unreal Engine is our renderer and the program that we design out of. And these backgrounds, these environments were shot on a stage with in-camera VFX. So we designed the sets, we then passed them over to the stage teams, and then they record into them. That's how we did it for Star Wars, at least. Now we're doing the whole process from end to end. And so when we show you these side-by-sides, what I'd like you to notice is how close they are. We're doing a lot of these sets months and months before the shoot, and they look identical to the key creative's vision, which is always the most important part. That mesh is the actual screen where it intersects the real world. So wherever you see that grid, that's the LED screen. Thank you. So I'll be doing most of the talking today, but Safari will be taking a section, and we have a handoff on a lot of these. We wanted to start with who are we? A lot of people ask us personally, how did we get to go from an artist to entrepreneurs to having a company to being executives and then doing all this work. So we want to give you guys a little 20-year journey very quickly. So first of all, we started as, I was an environment artist, and Safari was actually, what were you?
Environments, sets, and character.
And so back when we were doing that, I worked at the 3rd floor. He worked at, where were you working?
I was working at Techvis.
And that was almost 2 decades ago. And so 2 decades ago, we were just doing art projects and living together. This is some of our photos from back then. Like top left there, you see us doing a goofy faces for a photography blog that we had. That was like something we did on our off time. During the day, we did VFX, and then we would go out and do a lot of photography. So that's where we started.
And bottom left, you can see us playing a lot of Smash Brothers. We're roommates.
We love Smash. And then a decade and a half ago, maybe almost 15 years ago, around 8 years into working at the big studios, we quit our jobs and we decided we wanted to make a video game. So we actually started in VFX, and then we quit our jobs and we learned Unreal Engine.
And the bottom row shows the game we were trying to create. It's actually a Smash Brothers clone.
Safari created all those characters. I created the environments. And so that was our first big failure. We did not make that game. We quit our jobs and we failed. But it really taught us a lot about just being a freelancer, doing your own thing, building something. And so after that, we built what you're going to see today, Narwhal Studios. That was almost a decade ago, right? So that's what you're seeing here.
And that process,
in this picture on the left, we went to a rework, set it up so that we can pitch Epic Games the process that we were using on the Mandalorian.
So that's how we started. After we worked at our companies for a little bit, we saw an opportunity to use real-time engines on films. And one of the first things we did was, after the game failed, we created a presentation on how to use game engines on films. And so what you're seeing there is our first, we went to GDC, we had a meeting with Epic, and we booked a rework, and we just like, hey, we have an idea. This is what we think Unreal could help with on film. Shortly after that, maybe 5 years into having, around 5 to 6 years after having Narwhal, which used to be called Happy Mushroom, we landed The Mandalorian Season 1. So that's over half a decade ago that we did Mandalorian Season 1. And during that project, you'll see photos here, we were responsible for proving out the virtual art department process, for developing the sets and doing tests to show that Unreal could be photoreal, and for building a process that worked for the creatives in pre-production, right? All of a sudden, you're bringing some of that process. So one that I want to highlight here is the bottom center one here that says Art Department Physical and Virtual Set Test. That's just a look at the movie magic, right? Like that's an environment on wheels, and the background turned it into a whole city.
in the upper left, you see me making a
Scowl. Those first two pictures show us in front of where we were working at the time, taking pictures of photogrammetry, set deck photogrammetry. So we can take those photos and process those in reality capture, make 3D geometry with texture projected onto those, and then bring those into Unreal so we can show the high fidelity that Unreal can handle.
So back then, we were already testing and proving out the process on The Mandalorian Season 1. We were hired by Lucasfilms and ILM to be the team that helped everyone understand how this process could work on something like a film. And so that obviously was our big chance. After that, over the past decade, we've done a lot of work. We did the first project for Amazon on the stage. We did the first project for Netflix, et cetera. And we feel very lucky to get this information, to be artists that we're all of a sudden now able to have this company that's able to do what we love, right? So we only share this because we hope that if we did it, you try to. And so this is a little bit of my history. I'm very passionate about helping creatives succeed. I've worked on, even before Narwhal, I worked in production and art departments on a lot of these films. Mad Max being one of my favorite ones because I worked with George Miller directly over in Australia. And so off of this, we are now in a different place, right? Back then we were doing previs, now we're doing finals and in-camera VFX.
And for me, my initial introduction to the industry was VFX post-production. I was at a place called Luma Pictures, and a couple highlights. We're working on some Coen Brother movies that were mostly invisible effects, things that you wouldn't even know that were CG, like set extension, matte paintings, and CG snakes. And I love those kind of things. I love photorealism, and they really excelled at that. And then we worked on a couple of Marvel movies that were huge, and but I was really interested in the foundation of movie making and being in the planning process and like the concept phase. And so hearing Felix and a few other people talk about previs, I was really interested in getting into pre-production.
So Narwhal Studios started from that idea, right? From the fact that I knew that he was doing VFX and super high quality visuals. I'm in pre-production, and I'm like, how do I bring those high quality visuals to pre-production? And there's a third partner who is our game development genius, and his name's Andrew Mack, and he was the one that was like, hey, you know, let's use game engines. Or I guess at the time, he was the one that we brought in to help us use game engines at the scale we wanted, more like it. We were already doing the art, but there is a third person who is part of our team who's pivotal, called Andrew Mack, and he's our game design and engineering brain. Previs and pre-production, finals VFX, and then game development, like I showed earlier. Without saying, it's not just us, right? Like, we have a team of amazingly talented directors. We do have a very amazing creative leadership. Here's some work from Mark Austin, where he did visualization, direction, creation. He created a lot of the sequences on the film, and when he works with them, he's blocking out all of the shots. So like, here's an example of some of the side-by-side work that he does. He's directing the right side. So we're very into story, and we like to see all of our environments in the context of the story. Here's a face that Safari sculpted while he was at Luma Pictures, just to show some of the work from the team, our past. Also some of Safari's past work. He was a creature and character artist at the time. This is some of one of our art directors' work. They made this, he directed this Alien Isolation and Star Trek cinematics. And so we're here for all of them, right? Like, I'm only showing this because it's not just us. These guys deserve to have some of the credit. This is some of my old work. I did previs on this. Did a lot of the shots for this and a lot of the asset design in pre-production. Really just showing this to show a little bit of our experience before we jump into the lessons that we want to share. So if you notice, a lot of these we do a lot of visualization, which is not the final. It's because we're very obsessed with story and we like building full sequences. I'm just going to jump from here onto the next thing since we have so much to go through. So let's jump into the reason we're here. So based on our experience, we just wanted to share some of what we've learned, and hopefully it could help you in your career. First of all, the foundations of filmmaking are the same, right? Pre-production is planning, production is on location and backlot shoots, and editorial. Like, the foundation is the same. It's driven by the director, the production designer, cinematographers, etc. But we're seeing new tools in our toolkit. Previs has been around for, at this point, close to 20 years, because I at least know that much from my own personal experience, maybe 30 if with other people's experience. So previs has been around for a long time. We started a company with something called the virtual art department. It got titled, but really it's just real-time artists in pre-production that are more focused around the mind of the production designer. So designing sets, designing worlds, and we had a secondary priority around visualization. So that's how or previs, that's how we started the company. And then production, as you can tell, has a couple of new tools too. Green screen has been around for a while, but now we have a new tool in our toolkit, and that's in-camera VFX. Then post, same thing. We have VFX, but now you're seeing new kinds of rendering through Unreal, through Unity, etc. How does this actually benefit the production? Well, first of all, it's nothing new, right? There's nothing new being done here. Photogrammetry is old. A lot of the things we're going to talk to you about aren't necessarily new. How we are applying it, how people are engaging with it, I think is. And so a lot of these processes come from post. The virtual art department is really us bringing shot layout, and blockouts to pre. Visualization was about bringing animation, the beginning pieces of animation to pre. And final environments are also done in post. Now you're just bringing them forward so that you can shoot directly on the stage. And so the advantages that we're seeing here, first of all, your filmmakers are involved on all of the foundational work. So that's the director, the production designer, the cinematographer, the writers, etc. Secondly, what that gives you is a potential for shortened timelines. They have access to all of the information. They have access to make the decisions that most people don't have. And so now you're bringing all this to pre, and it's going at the same time than the physical. So it's not like you're extending, it's going in tandem. And third, during pre-production, if you're able to bring some digital workflows and use real time, all of a sudden everyone's reviewing things in a visual way. So you're not allowing people in production and post to go without potentially knowing what they're going to create. You know, green screen creates a lot of doubts, but not even green screen. When you're working in traditional production, you typically just get a couple concept art frames, and that's not enough if you really want to account for how much your movie's going to cost and build it, know exactly what it needs. This is a process that can help. Who's leading the charge? The key creators. Some of the individuals that we told you. They are still the ones leading the charge. They're the ones that we work with. We're typically engaging directly with them. The storytellers. And who are the ones that support them? There's two new key roles that support the leaders. One of them are art directors. Now, these art directors are now being called virtual VAD art directors, because it's art directors that have real-time experience, as well as VFX, as well as set design, right? So someone like Safari, they're pretty rare. Secondly, previs directors. Previs directors, previs supervisors have been around for a long time, but these are people that really understand story and understand how to bring a director's vision to life. And so now you have previs supervisors that are turning into previs directors. These are people that have worked with Jon Favreau or Steven Spielberg for 10, 20 years, and now they're hired to build full sequences, like full-on parts of films, full-on parts of TV shows. I showed you guys earlier some of the work, the animated work, the visualization, directing. Mark Austin, he's building full minutes and designing shots early in production. And then all the assets, all the shots, everything gets passed on to the following teams so that everyone's on the same page. Now, one thing I wanted to jump into before we go into the entire process is, what are the challenges around this process? And this is important to note because you're going to see us repeat some concepts because we're trying to mitigate these challenges, right? So first of all, for this process, you need a production team that values the process. You need a director that wants to work with it. You need a production designer that wants to work with it. And part of why we created the process is because getting them engaged is the goal. Real time, all of a sudden, I'm not working in Maya and something that's ugly, gray, not as high quality as something out of Unreal. So the cinematographer or the production designers, they're engaged. They'll place cameras, they'll light with me. So that's the first problem I see with people that want to do virtual production and camera VFX. The director doesn't know what the hell it's about. They don't want to do it. You know, it's like they've been forced into the process a lot of times. And the best projects that we've gotten are people that want to use it. Second thing is timely reviews and approvals. That's a big one for anyone that does production. Obviously, real time can fool you into thinking that it's good enough. So like sometimes we look at things and people, they're just the shoot, or there's certain deadlines they have to hit, but there were no milestones explaining to them that at this point you need to pass it off to the team that's going to take it to final. Because it is easy to just keep iterating and iterating and iterating because it's real time, it's so fun. But having a strong approval and review process is important, especially in film and TV, because they don't work with game engines. So they need that rigidity. Third, weekly budgeting with the producer. I explained earlier that this is a very visual process. That gives the producer more work to do. All of a sudden, it isn't, we have 1,000 green screen shots that are going to go to post, each cost this much, right? All of a sudden, you can see each shot. And so that adds another layer where the producer just has to be engaged with the process. We have to budget on a weekly basis. You might have a producer that comes in and says, hey, I need this shot to be half the price. That's easy. Bring in the production designer, bring in the director, bring in the cinematographer. The cinematographer might say, let's change the time of day from daytime to nighttime. That could cut your cost by half. Or instead of using a 35 millimeter, I'm going to use a 90. That makes the background really blurry. So there's a lot of tricks that you can use in pre-production to help reduce those budgets. And that's why the producer needs to be very engaged. Third, or fourth, another challenge is the pass-off from pre to production and post. In production, vendors and people working on the project don't typically share. It's very regimented. And so we're all about sharing. We're all about working with everyone's stuff. Like, we really want to add value to production itself. So that pass off from pre, if you're a team working in this and you want to add real value, there has to be a proper pass off process. So that might mean what's going to happen to all the assets? What happens to all the shots? There's a lot of things that you are now bringing to the table, and a lot of people might not know what that is. So it's on you, if you're doing this, to explain to them what you're going to give them and what's the value that it brings, how to use it. For example, on Mandalorian, if you're working with Jon Favreau and his top 5 guys, you know, like the DP from Dune, we worked with him on the first season. You have to make sure that when the next team takes that, they know that Jon Favreau and the DP of Dune selected those images, because the next team might just change it. They don't know. That's normal. That's normal. You just change it. So it's really important. And lastly, the asset database. We're managing hundreds and hundreds, maybe thousands of assets sometimes in pre-production, and that's not when you typically do that. VFX, they're used to that. So when you're doing this in pre, naming convention, there's just little things that you could put in place to help the asset database and the management, which will then also make passing things over easier. So what is our production workflow with that in mind? How do we mitigate some of this? Each production varies, and some of the projects that we're showing you today, we didn't take them to final, others we did. But one thing I wanted to highlight here is you'll notice that there's still a script, there's concept art, there's storyboards, but there's 2 large sections. There's this set design and visualization, and they go into a review. In this process, we're doing daily reviews with the production designer. Not weekly, not monthly, daily, every morning. And then we also host group reviews, weekly or bi-weekly, where all the filmmakers get to look at things in Unreal and give feedback. So and you'll see that there's arrows that come back so that you can address the notes, and then they get to basically discover their scenes and create their film.
So what are our design processes? Some of them are pretty classic. Concept art, storyboards. There's Techvis, set design, previs, and proof of concept. Personally, proof of concept is my favorite. That's the kind of R&D area where there's an idea and it doesn't have a definitive answer. We'll start working on it with a small team, short timeline, just like the proof of concept for The Mandalorian, showing how Unreal Engine can show or can pull off high fidelity.
And we just spoke about our reviews. So when we're doing our reviews, one thing I don't have here that I can add later is the fact that we're like a funnel. We take assets from VFX. We take assets from the art department, the set designs. We take assets from asset libraries online, Unreal Engine Marketplace or Quixel, etc. And they serve as a funnel to the review. We grab all of that, we prep it, and then we host these reviews where you're virtually location scouting. And so there's 3 major ways that we scout these locations and why we do it. We do it because instead of having a turntable and asset, you can look at things in context of the shot, right? The director's in there and the cinematographer, they're placing cameras. You can look at everything in the context of what you're making for the film. And so there's 3 versions that we do. We will mail you computers to your home, and then you can meet up with all your pals in the cloud. Or in the middle one, you see a photo of our setup for
Mandalorian Season 2.
So this is our setup for Mandalorian Season 2. In the office, we can also just set it up locally, and then you guys, or gals, can meet in the cloud together as well, right? But of course, the most popular one is screen share. You have someone like Safari at the other side, the DP works with Safari or someone else, and they instruct, and so you're looking at things in the context of the shot. It's still a location scout. That's really what we want to get out there. Now, here's some photos of some different setups we've had, right? Like, top left is from Black Adam, top middle is Safari at his house, top right is our setup with the Lucasfilms team, like the space, and then the bottom right is Safari with...
That's Rob Legato, VFX supervisor of Titanic and a bunch of other great projects. Heavy hitter, and Caleb Deschanel, DP of Lion King and a lot of other films. And we were planning for it was the Academy, I forget the title of this, it was the Academy Awards, Oscars. They were putting on a presentation for their members to go over virtual production. And so we were planning out the shoot that they were going to do at an ICVFX stage. And Rob Legato was in VR at one point, placing cameras, and Caleb was helping with lighting.
So one thing that's really amazing is right here, if you see, this is actually, Rob's not in the headset here, but in this image he is. That's him in a headset, VR headset, critiquing it as if he was there on the day. What we're seeing is a lot of these prolific individuals that have worked on some of our favorite movies now using the tech to help them see what they're going to make before the day. This is something that already looks photoreal, and they're able to still visualize and play very close to the day where they're going to shoot, right? We still had some clear milestones and approvals that we needed them to hit, but it still is something you can work on till a lot later than something like a traditional VFX time. And so one question we get is, okay, well, great, you get all those people at the beginning, and then they make decisions, and then production and post take it, and they're going to change it. So we developed another process that's a turnover process, and these are 3 different projects, and they show examples of blueprints of the shoot. So this is like the stage and different configurations, and the final shots that we did out of Unreal or with ILM, and we create these turnovers to pass them off. You guys heard the challenges earlier. Pass them off to all the other teams. It's like a blueprint of everything we've done, the information we've gathered, the shots that we did with the cinematographer, the art direction that we did with the production designer, the story that whatever story elements that we did with the director, etc. So yeah, even storyboards, like it all depends. Each project is unique, but a proper pass-off is very important. What are the tools that we use? A bunch of them. I mean, tools have gotten so easy, right? So we try to use the best tool for the job. What we do use Unreal Engine for is to host those reviews, though, because Unreal is something that has invested a lot of money into making those reviews accessible. We have multi-user scouting, which allows multiple people to see themselves inside of Unreal, etc. And we've developed a lot of proprietary tools to help with the process as well, because the review process is something that we really bank on. So like, as these grow, when you're small, like I invite everyone to do this yourself, right? Like Unreal's free. When you're small, it's like naming convention isn't a problem, but as you scale, we've had to build a lot of tools to support the scale of the process. And so 3 of the main things we created was, first of all, We have a database process where we host assets for the art department, VFX, virtual production, etc. And we're able to compartmentalize things so that the right people see the right things. And so secondly, we've created a lot of tools for the key creatives. So our production designers have tools where they can measure really easily. And inside of the headset, our cinematographers, we always give them their own lens kits and light kits matched inside of Unreal. And third is our artist tools, right? All of a sudden, this is a process that's blending art department. Art department works in Rhino and softwares like that. VFX, other softwares, and game artists, other software. So we've built a lot of software so that the ingestion of those assets into Unreal and into the review process is easier. But then after the review, we need to break all those assets and send them back out to the people. So we have tools for that as well. This is super important as you scale, right? Like most of our projects are between 3 to 4 people, but we have a lot of them that sometimes go upwards 20 to 25 people. And so when you're designing with those many people, you're working through thousands of assets, hundreds of shots. It's really important to have tools.
What did we do with Lucasfilm on Star Wars live action series? We served as their virtual art department, handling virtual set design, asset development, lighting, set deck photogrammetry, and virtual location scouts.
So this is a video that has some of what we had in our sizzle reel, but it's focused around Lucasfilms. Sorry, could you mention what the shows are?
Some of them are Obi-Wan and Mando Season 2 right here. This is Mandalorian Season 1. Season 3. Back to 2. And Book of Boba Fett.
At times when we were building this, at first it started, I was supervising the Mandalorian Season 1. Safari then went on to supervise and art direct multiple after me. And so our teams, when we were doing Mandalorian Season 1, it was one team. It started 4 people. We grew to around 15 people. We had photogrammetry team right as well. By Obi-Wan, which is I think 2 years later, we had 2 teams running in tandem, designing all the sets, and they were both around 16 to 18 people.
And that's a mixture of artists and some management and leadership and photogrammetry people.
Yeah, so the artist group was smaller.
Like Felix was saying, over the past several years, we worked on several Star Wars live action series that use the ICVFX method, starting from Mandalorian Season 1, which Felix supervised. I went on to supervising Season 2 and all the rest of them up until Skeleton Crew.
And so it's hard to put into perspective how much you're doing in these. Like the amount of time we were on these, Mandalorian Season 1 was maybe 6 months. I think by Skeleton Crew we were on closer to 9 to 10 months. Across the years, I mean, 350 plus real-time sets, just so much work. And then we onboarded 30 plus creatives. And what we mean by that is each one of these seasons had different key creatives a lot of times, definitely different cinematographers, different directors. All of them had to be taught how to work with a team that uses real time. We're invited into the scouts. We had to recreate the light kits and lens kits for each different DP every season. So that's something that I wanted to point out there. 10,000 still frames, insane. We'll show you guys what that means. During the scouts, the director, the production designer, the cinematographer, most of the cinematographer and the director, they're placing cameras. This is even before anything's animated. These are the frames that they use to move on to decide if they even want to do previs or if they want to do ICVFX, etc. So it's a great planning tool, and our team was used a lot for not only ICVFX, but traditional VFX and for traditional production for that reason. And lastly, it says here that we facilitated 2,130 virtual location scouts during that time. Gave us a lot of respect for storytelling, a lot of awareness of how hard it is to make movies and TV shows, and a lot of visibility into what the director cares about, the production designer, and those key creatives care about.
And in these shows, what are we actually designing? We're helping design locations, and then we're getting into the sets, physical and virtual, and constructing the scenes with lighting and cameras, like Felix was saying, placing a whole bunch of cameras with chess pieces, which are just static models, assets that are representations of the characters. So we place them with the production designer, DP, everyone who's in those sessions, and then the DP can go through and place those cameras, making the shots that they're wanting to make. And who's leading the charge for this? It's all of these people. These are all the key creatives for Ahsoka. It's ranging from the production designer, Andrew Jones, VP supervisor, Clint Spillers, all the way to VFX, the DPs, Q and Eric, and then Jon Favreau, Doug Chang, Dave Filoni, writer, director, production designer. They're all in this scene. So this is a photo or a screen grab that is of a hilltop set in Ahsoka. We've gone through so many versions of this hilltop, we land on this version, and this is just a snippet of them, Filoni and Jones, off to the side, talking about the general layout of the physical set.
Sorry, are they, so this is a virtual location scout. Are they doing it in the office or from home?
They are, there was a mix. And I believe it was in the office at this point.
So we showed you earlier some of the tools and the way we do the scouts. This is an actual image of what Unreal looks like when Safari is helping facilitate a meeting. Right, so Safari is on the box. This is what he sees. And these are the people, like Filoni, he was the director, I believe, of this season. So he's in there with Jones, who's the production designer. Jon Favreau, the executive producer. I don't know if any of you have ever heard of him. And then we have Doug Chang, right? And we have a lot of other people here, that the VFX supervisor. So when we're driving these scouts, they're all in the meeting. And Safari, this is what he is seeing, and he's helping them. You know, the cinematographer might go, oh, you know, I like this shot. Can you make the sky brighter? Because it feels dark. For this scene, I want the sky brighter. And we do that live.
Yeah, at this point, and this is another point from what Felix mentioned before, everyone's in VR or has a screen share they can move around on their own. They have their own perspective, and they can change their perspective however they want. They can go to a far-off mountain and actually talk about or place a camera for another completely unrelated VFX shot. Jon Favreau's over there on the other side talking with somebody else. Andrew Jones and Filoni are on this side talking about something completely different. And in those reviews, those virtual scout sessions, what comes out of those reviews? They're placing cameras, they're taking screen grabs, we're taking screen grabs of things that they comment on, and we're producing tons of imagery. And most notably, it's camera images from the camera's perspective. So the DP is placing cameras with those chess pieces. Those are examples of the chess pieces. And we render those out. We send them out through email, just so everyone has those. They can have conversations on their own outside of these reviews to continue the conversation of they're talking about what kind of lighting they need for this, or the change of layouts, and they'll have that conversation off to the side. But then we'll make these big blackboards that are the images from the previous or the scenes that happen after this scene, this lighting scenario.
So the blackboards, what you're seeing there is an Unreal Engine scene. So this is out of Unreal. In art departments and on films, they typically have blackboards with the scenes the storyboard scenes. So we create the storyboards digitally out of Unreal, right? We might take those storyboards that exist, we go and we work with the cinematographer, we make the frames. When Safari's doing his review, he'll put blackboards inside of Unreal so that they can use it in the same way they would use it on the production. So this is a frame of the reference that the key creators were using inside of Unreal. They might even be in headsets, walking up to it and going, oh, we're working on this one now. Okay, let me go back, right? So it creates this really amazing environment where they're almost working in the art department, like they're working in the way that they would traditionally.
And how do we build these sets? It is a pretty simple process. It's going from layout, very basic, primitive shapes, grayscale. Our department refers to it as white card models. They use little foam core pieces to build out these sets, but we build them out in 3D in Unreal. And it gets into conversations of scale and layout with just basic lighting, basic materials, mostly grayscale. And then once that's approved to a certain degree, we'll go into color and light, where we up the quality of the assets. We we introduce textures. We bring in the actual high-res assets, and then we sit with the DP for virtual pre-lights. They'll guide us on how they envision the lighting in the set, and we take it, we do our adjustments, we bake it down, and we present it again, and then that goes over and over and over through other virtual location scouts, virtual pre-lights, until we get it right. And then into final pixel, which is the polished part. And how do we plan for these shoots? Techvis helped with visualizing and planning from the easy and complex shots early in production. This is us trying to visualize things like the physical set, or the practical set, which is in yellow, and then the blue wall, which is the LED screen. It is the representation of the LED screens, and then we show an overview of what that looks like in relation to the virtual set.
So we're building, as we're building the environment, this is happening in tandem. One thing that's important for Narwhal is we're always trying to reduce waste. So when we're using Unreal, we're really using it to identify what's the hero area that needs to be built and at what quality. And then what's the mid-range area and what's the low-range area. So the yellow is the physical set. And of course, from there, you go high. Most difficult is going to be the things that are closest to camera, and you go further, et cetera, et cetera. So Techvis is happening all the time, because if you can't shoot it or if you can't use it, you know, there's not much point of taking it further.
Plus, a lot of times, like you're saying, it's the cameras are facing this 270 degrees or 180 degrees of the screens or the virtual environment. We're not going to focus on what's behind those cameras. Were the sets created used on the stage? So this is a side-by-side, not necessarily side-by-side. Top image is from us from the pre-production stage. It's just a general view of the environment. And you can notice that there's a lot of similarities with the textures and the layout of the set dressing with the final show shots.
So yeah, at the bottom, the final show shots are when they shot into it on the stage. One thing I want you to notice, though, is, again, because months before we're working with the cinematographer, when they get to the stage, look at how the lighting is exactly the same. So we're not just lighting things in pre-production, we're lighting it the way that they want to get the shot exactly on the day. That's very different. It's not concept art. Concept art changes. When you deliver concept art in pre-production, it's a 2D image. You look at the movie, they're typically pretty different. So the process we wanted to create is how do we get close, so close at the beginning where it just doesn't change? And if it does change, it's not what the storytellers need to tell their story.
And just another example of this, the previous one was Pele's Hangar. It's used throughout all the seasons of The Mandalorian so far. This is the caves of Mandalore, and you can notice that all the major pieces of the set dressing, the lighting, directionality, is all translated into the final shot. And just another example of season 2, episode 5. We're going to show some breakdowns of that episode in the following slides, but it's just showing the similarities of what happened in pre-production in our VAD design phase, where the production designer was very into making sure that everything was laid out properly. The DP Baz was very much, he knew exactly the shots that he wanted, so he knew the direction that we would have to build out.
What, again, pointing out that like the frames that we're doing are 100% out of Unreal. The frames that are the final are an actual shoot out of a camera, and they look identical in lighting, right? So when they're working on these, they're really, really, really trying to use the content that we did to match the shoot. And we're not at the shoot for this, but it's really beautiful to see our work translate forward.
And how long do these sets usually take? It ranges. For this one episode, I broke these down. Mandalorian Landing, it was about 3 weeks worth of work with one artist, but it's a lot of the same kind of tree, the same kind of landscape, and then very simple lighting. But then something like the Magistrate's Courtyard, it was around 6 weeks, 3 artists working on this, a bit more involved, very specific design work had to be tailored. And then something like the Dry Riverbed, 5 weeks with 2 artists. It was a lot of bespoke trees, bespoke landscape assets that actually, after a dozen different layouts of this set and production designer building out clay miniature models, he and Dave Filoni got a version that they liked in this foot by 1 foot by 1 foot clay miniature, and they gave that to us, where we photogrammetried it, brought that into Unreal, scaled it up, and then readjusted our layout. How much of the episode did the sets cover? This is just one episode, but the yellow indicates the amount of time that the sets were on screen. You can kind of maybe see the white, the main bar, that's the length of the episode. Top row on the bottom, the images are from the VAD, just screen grabs from Unreal Engine, just showing the intent of the scenes, and we included those in the turnover documents for ILM to continue with, and then the final shots at the bottom.
Something to point out on this one, Lucasfilms, when we're working with them, they were aiming to do, I believe, 40 to 50% in the volume. So the Mandalorian series and the ones we're talking about, they were trying to do some portions live action and a backlot in our location, and then also a large percentage of it in the stage. This is a really good example because you can see it in one episode.
And then do the design, the assets designed in Unreal work in traditional VFX? Yes, there's a little bit of tweaking that has to be done, but they're assets that have their models and they have textures. They just need to be readjusted to whatever renderer that you're going to work in. But on the left, Unreal, and right, Arnold, just a quick test to show that you can get a similar looking look from Unreal.
So like, this was one of the proof of concepts and tests that we had to do in 2018 for The Mandalorian to help Lucasfilms agree to using this process, right? Like they wanted to know, are these assets throwaway? If like you're doing all of this in Unreal and you're working with the creatives, is it really gonna work in a traditional workflow? So we've had, we showed some examples of how it would look rendered, but we also showed them how we would export them, and we built tools to make it easier to get to this point.
And we aren't working in a vacuum. We collaborate with the art department daily. We are constantly in communication with art directors, set designers who are working on the physical component of the virtual sets that we're working on. For this instance, there are these things called Zulu blocks. They're big triangle square shapes that the art department builds so that they can add elevation changes to a set without adding a bunch of dirt to a set. And so we constructed our virtual versions of those Zulu blocks. And what art department did was reorganized the Zulu blocks in 20 or so different ways. And we went, they took a couple photos, top down, 3/4, so that we can understand the layout. We replicated that in Unreal, and then we put dirt on top of that so we can visualize what that would look like in relation to the virtual set, so that it all matches correctly.
This one might be a little confusing to understand, so I'm going to try to almost single something out. Safari, can you grab the mouse and hover around the Zulu boxes? So this here is what he's referring to the Zulu boxes. These geometrical shapes that I think the name came from, I believe, Avatar. And so that's what they actually use on the stage to give the ground a little bit of undulation. You know, yeah, it's a dirt path, but they want to, so we grabbed that and we throw it in Unreal. In the bottom left, that's the environment with the Zulu pieces, but now with terrain on top. So that even in Unreal, when they're putting cameras and they're trying to figure out the shots, it's exactly the way it would be in the physical set, so that they're actual shots you can use. So this is a lot of the marriage between physical and virtual. We have a lot of processes like this, so we're just showing you a few examples.
And another example of that is Jason Mahakian, amazing artist. He makes these miniatures that are realistic. They are sometimes 5 feet wide, smaller. This one was about 2 feet by 3 feet. He was constructing the Stonehenge for Ahsoka, for the planet Cetos, and he built this out over, I'm not sure how long, very quick though, and we took photogrammetry, photos for photogrammetry of the ground, which was going to be built out in the physical set, and then individually these stones to place in the physical where they were actually going to build these out, but also the ones that were going to be in the virtual. We took those and we processed those through, since they were small, the scale was off, so we made them correct size, went through ZBrush, we retextured those, but keeping very close to what his intention was.
So the CGI is a pretty new art. Model making is not. And so it's one of my favorite things to work with model makers. They've been doing this for a long time, and they're so good. So a lot of what we invite the art department to do is, hey, if you have a model maker that you like to work with, let's work with them. Even if sometimes they give us models that are just out of foam, and it's just blocking out the world because like they're so good at it. And so this is an example of Jason, who I actually have known for like 15 years. I worked with him, I believe, on Avatar, the last Airbender. Sorry, no, Alice in Wonderland, years and years ago. And so, yeah, it's like doing photogrammetry of their work, and if you're ever working with someone that does model making, team up.
Yeah, because I don't have a photo of this, but he also did on season 2, the Razor Crest crashes through a ice floor and into an ice cavern. And he had cut into a big block of foam to get the shapes right, the actual big columns of ice. So he had that cut in half. We made photogrammetry of that, put it together, blew it up to real scale, and then we just chopped up the columns so that we retextured those to be correct scale. And then we actually put him into VR to explore, and it was mind-blowing for him.
So we're going to cut this one a little short because we have 3 minutes left. So I want to get through something really quick. So just to finish that, this is that environment in multiple different setups built off of the model. For Antman, we did something similar, and I'm going to play this video, and then I'm going to move to the next section. So as you can tell, again, with Antman on a film, planning, one thing we didn't do on Antman was we didn't have to take it as far as we did with Star Wars. It was very much design, planning, passing off the assets that were layout mostly to other teams. But a lot of the camera work, we worked with Bill Pope, the DP from The Matrix, Dream Come True. And he was the person that worked with, I was the VP supervisor on this, and our art director, Carlos Fuello, placing cameras. We worked with the production designer, Will Hatay. We worked with Peyton Reed. So this is another project where those weekly reviews had all those individuals in the call. Considering we're not going to have time to finish this presentation, I'm going to post it online. There's another section, some other sections for us to look at, like for you to check out. So I'll just show you guys what that section is, and then we'll post it online next week. So the last section we wanted to show you is really focused on the most popular question. Is it true that virtual production makes the projects cheaper? Long answer, short answer, yes, it can. Long answer, probably not the way that you think. And so that's that, everyone. Thank you.